I won't say manual testing. I'm not going to say it. I don't think anybody should say manual testing, but I absolutely will not. And it's because of these three things. It's a vague and unhelpful term. When you say that you are doing manual testing, I don't know what you mean. And you might think that's strange because I've been a tester for many, many years. In fact, I used to use the term manual testing about 10 years ago and before that. So you might think that I'm being silly when I say that I don't know what you mean by manual testing. When you say, I just did some manual testing, but I really don't. And I'll tell you why. I'll give you an example. Let's zoom in on here. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of some real testing that I really did. And I was testing a thing called CryptPad, and there's this Kanban board that is part of CryptPad. So I'm testing it. And as you see, I'm interacting with it. I'm typing things in. I'm moving things. Oh, I just did something right there. I just used a little trick to paste in a bunch of text instead of typing it. So wait, is that automation? Did I just use automation? I thought this was manual testing. Most people would call this manual testing, but it looks like I used a little bit of automation there. And then I noticed you can export. You can export. So I exported. This is the file that gets exported. And I realized that if I created one of those files and then imported it, then I wouldn't have to type all the data in myself, and I could do deeper testing. So this is called survey testing, because during this part of the testing, I am exploring and learning the product. Then I wrote this program. This is a data generator. It's written in Perl. Is this manual testing? It's a program. I manually wrote it, but most people would not call this manual testing. I mean, after all, I'm writing a program. I'm not even testing anything. But this program produces this data. This data, as you see, is full of stuff. It's full of randomly generated, rich information for items on a Kanban board. Well, let's look at what that leads to. Now my testing looks like this because I import that file that I've just created. Having imported it, I can do all kinds of cool things. And in fact, in real life, when I did this, within about a minute, I found my first bug, because it turns out that this thing doesn't handle bolding correctly. And so I clicked on the bold filter and then noticed that things weren't bolded. So this is a little bug in how it handles markdown. So what is this? Is this manual testing? Well, I'm not using Selenium. I'm interacting with it. And yet I used a tool to automatically construct data. So it doesn't seem to be entirely manual. It doesn't seem to be entirely automated. So this is what I mean when I say that I don't know what you're talking about if you say you did manual testing. I bet that some part of your so-called manual testing involves the use of tools. Maybe you got data from some other place that was produced automatically or gathered automatically. See, I don't know, because the word manual just covers up all the interesting things that testers do. When testers use tools of different kinds to automatically set things up for them to test, or to produce data, or to automatically log certain things, even though they're interacting and experiencing the product, they're obscuring the true nature of that process, and they're making it sound like they're just doing manual labor. This is not helping our industry. So I think it's a vague and unhelpful term. Now, that doesn't mean it's a toxic or bad term, but I think it is a toxic or bad term because of the second thing. The term manual testing, unfortunately, has become a tool by which technologists who do not like testers and do not want testers to get in their way demean testers. It's become a way for them to demean testers, to describe testing in derogatory terms. And the way they're doing it is they don't like people who get in their way and slow things down and ask questions and critique things. They don't want people to report bugs, for that matter. If they can get away with it, they would ignore bugs. So what do with these annoying testers? Well, they, as much as possible, want to get testers under control. So you'll hear a complaint about real deep testing where people will say, oh, those testers, who knows how much work they're going to do or when they're going to be finished. And we don't have time for that because we have to do delivery. We have to do continuous delivery. So how do we turn this into a process that works like clockwork? And they paint testing as this activity which is mystical and out of control. So they want to turn it into scripts, and then they want to turn it into code because they understand code. They like code because code doesn't talk back to them. I think that's really what the sentiment is, what the emotion is. This is what I keep encountering when I'm dealing with people who are really into technology. They talk about testing like it's a messy, somehow dirty thing. And they want to turn it into something that's clean and predictable. But the very nature of testing is that it is not clean and predictable. That is just like the nature of bugs, is that bugs are not clean and predictable. Let me be specific about what I'm talking about. Testing involves lots of skills and lots of activity. I am modeling my coverage. I'm thinking critically. I'm advocating for testability. I'm doing all these things, visualizing output, designing experiments, all these things, moving data around. But there's one thing that's quite important that I do as a tester, and that is I check the output of the program. Checking is what we call it in my community. Checking is any algorithmic, mechanical process of controlling the product and evaluating its output. And checking is a useful, important thing to do. And it's automatable. So the technologists really like to focus on that. So what happens is you got this person doing this testing, and one of the things they have to do is checking, and that can be automated, and it's pretty important for, regression testing purposes, right? You would like to have that stuff automated. So first, to try to make it really systematic. The next thing is you say, all right, we've defined all these test cases. Now let's bring in a robot. Oh, look, this is a nice little robot. Cute little robot. How can this robot cause anybody any trouble? But these robots, they proliferate. And then your job becomes feeding the robots and taking care of the robots. So checking, automated checking, grows to push aside all the other things that testers do. So this is a problem. People say, hey, you should automate your testing. And they don't realize that if I automate the part of my testing I can automate, that's a lot of work. And then it becomes a lot of maintenance work. And then that pushes out all these other things that I need to do. But then there's this interesting move that they make, because once you're in the world of automated checking, most people would call it automated testing. I don't call it automated testing. I don't think you can automate testing, but a lot of people call automated checking automated testing. And here's the little move they're making. They say, oh, now you're doing automated testing. Your work is a tester. You are a tester, but now you're doing automated testing. So the feel of that, and what people hear who don't know much about testing, is all of testing now is automated. Not just some little part of it, but all of it is. And then if you push back on that, if you say, I think that we need more human testing, then they look at you like you're crazy. Because they say, why would you want to do what robots do? Robots do it so much faster than you do. We might as well replace you with a robot, come to think of it, because robots are so much faster than you. Well, what I say to that is, I'm reasserting that testing involves all kinds of things, all these different things. And I use tools to help me do all these things. You see all these little icons here? What we're saying in this slide is that there's lots of things that humans do to make testing succeed. And we use tools to help us all over the place. But the fact that we use tools does not mean testing can be automated, because the whole thing must be supervised and controlled by people. And you know this, even the technologists know this, because all you have to do is say, what happens when that automated test case fails? Oh, well, then we have to investigate it. Like, okay, is that process automated? No, that process isn't automated at all. When things fail, we have to investigate. That investigation process is a big deal. But it's treated like it's a tiny little part of the process. And of course, the tests often, the automated checks often break for bad reasons, for reasons that don't have to do with bugs. And the result is we spend a whole bunch of time doing things that aren't at all testing, and they're only having to be done because tools have taken over. So I think that there's this problem with the word manual testing. It is being used to compare testers with manual laborers, and then it is used to imply that only automated testing is good, smart testing, which relies on ignoring all the many things that testers do to use their mind and use their judgment. So my little way of fighting back is I use certain alternatives to the word manual, which get around that. Here are my suggestions for a better way to speak. I will say interactive testing. Interactive testing means that I personally am involved, I am present, I am witnessing the process, I am able to intervene. So I'll just say, I tested that interactively instead of I tested that manually. You see? The cool thing is, people will understand that without you having to explain it. If you just slip that into a sentence, instead of saying manual, you say, I did interactive testing on that. Most people will immediately know what you're talking about. I've been practicing with this, so I've noticed with my clients that they seem to have no trouble with it. It's useful to talk about the opposite of interactive testing. The opposite of interactive testing is not automated testing. It's unattended testing. So interactive versus unattended. If I automate certain things, I don't have to be there when the automation is running. I can run that unattended. My favorite word to use, though, is experiential. Experiential testing. So I say, I performed experiential testing on that. Now, this requires a little bit of explanation. Although if you just say I did experiential testing, people will think they understand it and they won't be far off. It sounds like you experienced the product. Yes, that's part of what it means. But I have a more specific definition. What I mean by experiential testing is any testing such that the way I encountered, the way I got close to the product was just like some user that I have in my mind. So I am trying to reproduce the user experience for different kinds of users. And this comports with what I'm sure most of you really have in your mind when you say manual testing. You mean I'm using the product like a user. What's the opposite of that? Instrumented testing. Instrumentation, such as various forms of automation that might stand in and operate the product for us, instrumentation gets between us and the product so that we do not have the full experience of that product. And that can be okay. That's not necessarily a terrible thing. Take a look at this. This is some automation that I did for a client recently. This is classic GUI level automation. And this is a product called ThinkMD. And what's happening is these are little questionnaires that are filled out about the health of children. And the application helps people understand, diagnose illnesses. So this is just a little GIF showing this. You've all seen automation that looks like this. The problem with this kind of automation, though, is that I end up saving a whole bunch of screenshots, and I can look at the screenshots, but I don't have the actual experience of what it feels like to fill out each one of the panels. How long does that take? Is it frustrating? Can I press the wrong buttons? So the tester actually working on that, who I'm writing automation for, he goes through each of those panels and discovers things like that you can scroll down, and when you scroll down, you can't see a picture at the top, so that you may not realize that you're on the wrong panel when you answer a question. He complains about how the pictures look. He has problems where he gives the wrong answer and then goes forward and then realizes his answer was wrong and he can't go backwards. All that stuff is not going to be found by my automation, which is okay, because when we're in this project together, he and I, we know how limited the automation is. And we use the automation for a very specific purpose. We do not confuse that with what humans do. That's why we call it automated checking, not automated testing. So that's instrumented testing. We instrument our testing to some degree, but when we do that, we give up something. We put some distance between ourselves and the users. The final thing that I might say is that my testing was highly exploratory, meaning that I made choices as I went along, as opposed to scripted testing, where my choices are dictated for me in advance because I'm following test cases. So, bottom line, I don't use the term manual testing. I forgive you if you do. But I would like more of us testers to wake up and realize that there is a culture that's trying to come in and colonize skilled software testing. This culture is a culture of software technologists who want to take human judgment and human skill out of everything and replace it with code. This is an irresponsible project that will not succeed. But while they're trying to do it, a whole lot of smart people who might otherwise be attracted into software testing don't want to come near software testing because they see it as either manual labor or else they have to become a programmer. So there's a brain drain going on from testing. And I urge you to work against this brain drain, to join with me. And just as simple as saying interactive testing or experiential testing, which don't seem to indicate manual labor, but instead indicate that you're using your mind while you test. All right, that's my case. Thank you very much for listening. My name is James Bach. Bye.
No somos líderes por tamaño, sino porque conocemos al público, porque sabemos qué quiere, qué necesita y lo hacemos posible.
Bueno, bienvenidos de vuelta después de esta charla que acabamos de escuchar de James. Me voy a switchar al inglés porque lo tenemos a James en este momento. Así que, hi James, nice to see you. How you doing?
Hi, doing good.
How are you feeling? Are you happy to be here today with us?
I am happy. It's always exciting to be part of a conference and to try to help people.
It's a great honor for us to have you here today. We have 40,000 people registered on this event, so there's a lot of people seeing you right now. Yes. So we have some questions for you. The first one we have in Swapcar is, where do you think automated check-in is a good idea?
Well, automated checking is a good idea whenever I have a lot of facts that the product is producing, and I want to have surveillance of those facts, which just is about almost every testing situation you can think of.
Yes. Totally.
However, it can be quite expensive if the system that you are checking is constantly changing. If it is, especially if you're checking through a graphical user interface. So when I'm doing checking, I want to go through an API. I want to go through something very stable. And if I'm going to go through a GUI, well, then it's going to be after it stabilizes. Otherwise, all of my time is just going to be spent trying to keep up to date with this. Now, if you're not doing it for regression testing purposes, but you're doing it for primary testing purposes, maybe you write some throwaway checks that you know they're gonna break, but you don't mind because you're just using them for a day.
Yes.
If you're running a performance test or something and you just want to spin up a bunch of things, it could be quite inexpensive to do that.
Okay, good. Thank you. There's another question. Sorry, I'm loading my Swapcar right now. What should be the approach that I have if I'm working in a context like you described, where the company, all the people think that manual and automated testing is different things? How can I colonize them? This is a question from Hernan.
The general answer to the questions like this is build your credibility, and then people will just treat you like the expert, and they'll do it your way. A problem that testers often find themselves in is they haven't built their credibility. They haven't demonstrated that they really understand testing. You've got to demonstrate it. You've got to prove it. You've got to be passionate about testing. You want other people to roll their eyes and go, oh, that guy is such a nerd for testing. All he ever thinks about is testing. Because when they treat you that way, when that's how they think of you, then when people have a question about how testing should be done, they don't try to tell you how to do it. They'll ask you how you think you should do it. And this is also true for developers. It's true for all technical people. If you have no credibility, then people think that they know how to do your job better than you know how to do your job. So you've got to rise in their estimation and in their respect so that you get listened to. A lot of my teaching is teaching people how to talk about testing in an authoritative way. So, I mean, listen to my voice. I'm speaking authoritatively. My voice goes down at the end of sentences. I also got these thick framed glasses that make me look like a scientist. I grew a beard for this. Just for this talk, I grew a beard just so that you would take me seriously. Silver hair. Now, when I was young, I didn't have the gray beard, but I read all the books on testing. I knew all the terminology. I was obsessed with it. And people and my bosses and my coworkers, they responded to that, and then they listened to me.
Okay, James, we are out of time, but we have a lot of questions for you on Swapcar, and I'm sure that people is going to contact you later on LinkedIn if you're okay with that.
If you give me them in writing, I'll just answer every question in writing. Or you can contact me, of course, on LinkedIn or Telegram or email, or get those questions to me any way you want, and I will absolutely answer them. I tried to get into the conference system, and the registration process was all in Spanish. Felt like I was late for Spanish class in my dream, and I didn't have any clothes on, and I was in the wrong place, and I just didn't know how to register. So
That's for you, Edu.
Edu, we will fix this for the next event.
Okay.
We will improve our usability.
It was a
Okay,
pleasure.
thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your time. See you
Pleasure.
soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Gracias a ustedes por estar viéndonos. Ahora volvemos con una tandita y ya estamos acá de vuelta.